The observation deck of the Celestial Wanderer hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-maintained starship. Through the reinforced viewport, the crimson swirl of the Helion Nebula painted the darkness with streaks of fire and shadow. But Mira wasn't looking at the stars. Her attention was fixed on the small, trembling creature huddled in the corner of the containment habitat. Rick was barely the size of a human child, though his species, the Vacrine, were known across 7 star systems as apex predators. Adult Vacrine stood nearly 3 meters tall, with obsidian scales that could deflect plasma fire and jaws capable of crushing durasteel. They were hunters, conquerors, fear-made flesh, but this one was just a cub, and he was starving himself. Day 6, Mira murmured into her personal log, her voice barely above a whisper, still refusing all food. Vitals are declining. Dr. Thorne wants to force-feed him, but I've asked for one more day. The cub, Rick, she'd named him, after the soft clicking sound he made when he slept, watched her with luminous golden eyes. There was intelligence there, sharp and ancient, but also something else. Fear. Deep, paralyzing fear. The Vacrine rescue had been pure chance. Their ship had intercepted a distress beacon near the outer rim, finding a damaged Vacrine scout vessel drifting through the void. The adults were dead, victims of some catastrophic systems failure. Only Rick had survived, sealed in an emergency pod, his tiny claws scratched raw from trying to break free. That had been 8 days ago. Mira pressed her palm against the transparent barrier separating them. Rick's head tilted slightly, tracking the movement, but he didn't approach. He never did. "You must be so scared," she said softly. "Everything you knew is gone. And now you're stuck with strange creatures who don't speak your language, who don't smell right, who probably look like prey to you." The word prey seemed to resonate. Rick's nostrils flared, 6 slits along his elongated snout, and his scales rippled with a nervous pattern of dark and light. Among Vacrine, color shifts communicated emotion. Mira had been studying the patterns obsessively. She glanced at the untouched bowl of nutrient paste inside the habitat. The ship's xenobiologist had synthesized it based on Vacrine dietary requirements. High protein, trace minerals, bioavailable compounds. Everything a growing predator needed. Rick wouldn't touch it. "He thinks it's poisoned," Dr. Thorne had theorized during the morning briefing. "Or contaminated." Predator species are notoriously cautious about unfamiliar food sources. But Mira suspected something deeper. She'd watched Rick for 6 days now, studied every movement, every sound. The way he pressed himself into corners, the way he flinched at sudden noises, the way his scales flickered with pale, washed-out colors whenever someone new entered the observation room. This wasn't caution. This was trauma. An idea had been forming in her mind since yesterday. Dangerous. Foolish, perhaps. But she was running out of options, and Rick was running out of time. Mira stood and walked to the habitat's access panel. Her fingers hovered over the controls. Override authorization. Mira Chen, Xenobiological Specialist, Clearance Sigma 7. The panel beeped. "Warning, manual entry requires protective gear and backup personnel." She ignored it and stepped through the opening portal. The habitat's atmosphere hit her immediately, warmer than the ship's standard environment, with a sharp mineral tang that reminded her of desert thunderstorms. Rick's scales exploded with color, crimson alarm patterns racing across his small body. He pressed himself harder against the back wall, a high-pitched keen escaping his throat. "It's okay," Mira said, keeping her voice steady and low. "I'm not going to hurt you." She moved slowly, deliberately, settling herself on the floor about 2 meters from the food bowl. Close enough to reach it, far enough not to threaten Rick's space. Then she did something that would have horrified the medical staff. She picked up the bowl of nutrient paste and brought it to her lips. The paste was designed for Vacrine biology, amino acid structures. Humans couldn't properly digest, trace elements that might make her sick later. But she checked the composition. Nothing immediately toxic. Nothing that would kill her. She took a small bite and forced herself to swallow, maintaining eye contact with Rick. His keenings stopped. His scales shifted to patterns of confusion, swirling grays and whites. Mira made an exaggerated show of chewing, of savoring, even though the paste tasted like chalk mixed with iron filings. She hummed contentedly, then took another bite. Rick's posture changed. His haunches lifted slightly from their defensive crouch. His head extended forward, nostrils working overtime. Understanding sparked in Mira's chest. He's never seen an adult eat before. The other Vakreen on his ship died before they could teach him. He doesn't know what's safe. She set the bowl down between them and pushed it gently toward Rick. Then she mimed eating again, bringing her empty hands to her mouth in the universal gesture of consumption. The cub watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His scales flickered through a dozen colors: uncertainty, curiosity, desperate hunger. His small body trembled. Then, in a movement so quick she almost missed it, Rick darted forward. His claws clicked against the floor. He stopped at the bowl, glanced at Mira one more time, and lowered his head. The first taste was tentative. His forked tongue, designed for chemical analysis, flicked out once, twice. Then his jaws opened, revealing rows of crystalline teeth, and he began to eat. Mira felt tears prickling her eyes. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as the small predator devoured his first meal in nearly a week. His scales gradually shifted to warm golds and soft oranges, contentment colors she'd learned. When the bowl was empty, Rick looked up at her. And for the first time since his rescue, he didn't look afraid. He took a cautious step toward her, then another. His scales pulsed with tentative greens, trust colors. Mira extended her hand slowly, palm down, the way she'd seen Vakreen greeting rituals performed in the xenological archives. Rick's snout brushed against her fingers, and she felt the warm puff of his breath. His scales rippled with deeper gold. "There you are," she whispered. "Welcome back, little one." Behind the observation window, Dr. Thorne stood with his mouth open, his datapad forgotten in his hand. 3 other crew members had gathered, watching the impossible scene. A human and a Vakreen predator cub, separated by every biological and evolutionary barrier imaginable, connected by the simplest act of all, sharing a meal. Building trust. Mira stayed in the habitat for another hour, just sitting with Rick as he explored his space with renewed energy. When she finally left, he didn't keen or hide. He simply watched her go, his scales a peaceful amber. In the days that followed, Rick would eat regularly, grow stronger, and eventually form a bond with Mira that xenobiologists would study for decades. But in that moment, all that mattered was a small act of courage. A human woman willing to risk herself to show a frightened child that the universe wasn't only cruel, that sometimes kindness could cross even the widest gaps, that sometimes all it took was someone willing to take the first bite.